Again, good afternoon, colleagues and friends and not family. So what have we learned thus far today? Or I should rather say whatever I learned as an agricultural economist, is that biotech operates a lot in three fields: medicine, the environment, and agriculture. And as Rian said a while ago, it seems that medicine is sort of the forerunner, which makes sense in a way, isn't it? Our CEO said at some point, and there he's leaving, that 14% of the GDP in Africa is agricultural related. He also said that more than 50% of employment on the continent, and I have this internal debate, and Dr. Chamanuka is not helping me. Some people say on the continent, and other people say in the continent. Now, I believe on the continent is the right way, but I might be wrong. What was also said is that tech uptake in Africa is slow. So I'm just raising a few of these points before we start to get our minds going. Is that true? Another speaker earlier today said tech in medicine today is the key to tech in agriculture tomorrow. Don't know if you picked that up. I found that rather interesting, because tech in medicine is, well, in the last few years we learned that it is incredible. Then just briefly, give me 3 minutes. Tim Cohen is a journalist for the Business Day, and he has a daily article that he writes after the bell relating to the JSE, I assume. He reported last week on a 2012 book called Abundance: The Future is Better Than You Think. That 2012 book was written, of course, then 10 years ago. Now, 10 years ago seems like not so long ago. I didn't have hair then, and I don't have hair now. So for me, it's not that relevant. But what did we have in the meantime? In 2012, Barack Obama got his second term. What did we have since? We had a grotesque character as president of the US, and we had a journalist, also sort of grotesque, as prime minister in the UK. So that if we think that was progress, then yeah, okay. But in this book, in the specific book of 2012, the predictions were online learning will take off. Now we know that's true. There will be faster computer chips. There will be a lot of biotech in food. There will be greater online participation. There will be more solar energy. There will be more 3D printing. And what was not mentioned was the mRNA advances in medicine, cloud computing, crypto technology. Now, Tim then goes on and says, but hey, 3D printing and nanotech and agri-tech didn't really take off to the same level as online learning and so on. And I sort of, being in the agricultural sector, felt that, hey, that wasn't completely fair. And after today, I believe it was absolutely not fair. We had some beautiful presentations on the role of agri-tech. But yeah, so there is a lot of evidence of agri-tech, but maybe it's not expanding as rapidly. So this is today, or the topic of this session is convergence and scaling innovation for impact. And I'm going to invite my colleague and my boss at the moment, Dr. Chamanuka, to start off with the first presentation. She will introduce herself in more detail. Thank you, Petronella.
Thank you, Dr. Fusco, and good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for being here. There's a bit of a change in the order of presentation, so I hope it doesn't kind of disrupt the effectiveness of the floor. The colleague that was supposed to present online was supposed to go first. He was talking more about convergence, and I'm here to talk more about scaling the innovations. But they are related concepts, so I think we should still be fine. Sorry, where do I move to the next slide? Okay. All right. Okay, so yeah, I just started off with, I think, issues that have come up time and again since this morning, not only in this room, but in the plenary as well. And the first issue is that technologies, a lot of the technologies that are being developed, most of them are, it's almost as if they're being developed for the shelf. And the value of death, yeah, quite a small proportion actually makes it to the intended target beneficiaries for one reason or the other. And then, yeah, even as we talk so much about this technological progress, we still have the traditional problems in Africa of poverty, food insecurity, low yields in agriculture, vulnerability to climate change. These remain realities of the African farmer. And then the third issue is also that there is public investment in R&D that is declining. So it's as if the input into the R&D process is becoming less and less, and yet on the other side we're faced with the problem of population growth. So somehow we either need to put more or we need to re-engineer the whole R&D system so that we get more out of it. So the question is, how do we ensure that farmers and particularly small-scale agro-business dealers adopt the technologies that are developed, and from these adoptions they are able to realize positive impact? And I want to emphasize positive there, as you will see soon from my talk, that yeah, not all impact is positive. And also, how do we ensure that for the technologies that are developed, we're able to have the entrepreneurs avoid the valley of death, and also we are able to realize these technologies to be scaled, because if we don't scale innovations, then we really do not actually translate them into usable products. So just to introduce a bit the concept of scaling, there's scaling up, scaling out, scaling deep. There's different types of scaling. And I use the reference from McLean and Gagani. They have a book that I can provide a reference for, but that particularly focuses on training, you know, scaling innovations that arise from public investment. So more like your public good innovation scaling. So if one talks about scaling up, then you can think, they use the example of an apple tree, where they say, okay, for when you want to talk about scaling up, you have an apple tree that produces one fruit, a small apple tree, and then you scale that through cultivar selection or whatever, to get to a point where you have a bigger tree that produces more fruit. Then you talk about scaling out. So you don't necessarily change the size of the tree. What you change is the number of the trees. So you have, you know, you move from one tree to increase the number of trees, but also you still achieve more output. And then you can also have a situation where you combine the up and the out, bigger trees, more trees, and more fruit subsequently. But of all this, the focus of my talk this afternoon is not just on the scaling. The scaling up and out and the up and out or the deep, none of them actually equate to scaling impact. So I want to emphasize that what we're talking about this afternoon is scaling impact. And why are we emphasizing scaling impact? Because a lot of the talk loosely focuses on just scaling. And I'm saying that no, scaling is not enough. Because it doesn't necessarily imply automatic impact or translate to impact. And also not all impact from research and innovation is positive. If one looks at impact, you'll find that there is differentiation of any technology that is introduced. And I think some of the issues have come up as well when you look at the technological gap, for example, between the rich and the poor, and the rate of adoption between smallholder farmers and large-scale farmers, the gender aspect of it. And then you've also got the vulnerable versus the powerful. So there is differentiated impact always. And that impact is not automatic. So I think one of the things that came up earlier as well is that, you develop these magnificent, research and innovation outputs. How do you then get them to actually have an impact, to translate into increased productivity, to translate into, solutions that are sustained for food insecurity? So one needs to realize that impact is not automatic. So you need to almost have a deliberate planning of scaling in terms of how you design your research and innovation interventions. Okay, so why do we talk about scaling up, scaling impact? So the desired positive impact for innovation in Africa, there are many reasons why we keep talking about it and why we also just need research and innovation. We want to improve food and nutrition security. We also want to have climate change resilience in our agricultural systems. And we want improved environmental conservation as well as jobs, livelihoods, enhancement for our people, and poverty alleviation. So these are real problems that we have to address as research and innovation. And then also, like I said, you can scale up, out and deep, regardless of whatever approach to scaling you take. The focus should be on scaling of positive impact, not just scaling in innovation. So sometimes we kind of get obsessed with numbers, but it is not a numbers game. It's about the impact. Okay, so like I said, I keep emphasizing this because what we also know now is that not all technological innovations have positive outcomes for society. And I think the science community has made some significant progress in terms of kind of re-engineering ourselves to think towards impact, not just research as an end in itself. If one looks at the history in terms of the paradigm shifts in science, you'll notice now that there's more and more talk of research for development, which Dr. Maginga referred to as a challenge-led kind of development. And then you've got inter, and transdisciplinary approaches becoming more and more the norm. And then you've got a lot of effort as well and development of capacity towards commercialization of publicly funded intellectual property. And then you've got concepts of co-creation and co-ownership of knowledge, which Dr. Maneshri also made reference to. And now we also have a new kind of concept that is coming up, and that is scaling science as a new research focus, almost like a new discipline. And what is scaling science? I borrow this from McLean and Gagani, the definition of it. They define it as scaling scientific research results to achieve impacts that matter. And then they make a two-pronged definition. The second aspect of it is development of a systematic, principle-based science of scaling. So it doesn't happen on its own. It's a capacity that we have to develop. And when we develop that, it's because the efforts that we make, we believe that they can increase the likelihood that innovations will benefit society. And when we talk about impact in this context, it is viewed as a multidimensional goal in terms of scaling. You can talk about magnitude of impact, which is more your numbers, then the variety of impact. So if you have a technology, what are the different types of impact that it can have? And then you can discuss it as well from an equity perspective, where you can actually analyze what is the equity of impact that is resulting from a particular research and innovation intervention. And then you also want to talk about the sustainability of impact, because there are so many ideas that really look great, but somehow they don't find themselves being sustainable over time. When I was younger, I remember a lot the Verimark things that would look very attractive on TV. You'd buy a few of those, and 6 months down the line, somehow it became unusable. So what I'm sharing with you today is the results of a process that I was part of, which was facilitated by the Canadian IDRC. They brought together a team of what they call scaling experts from the Global South, because there was a dominance of ideas in this field from the Global North, and their problems are different from us, the technologies, and you know the story. So we got together over a period of about 9 months, virtually discussing what is it that, is the problem with regards to scaling for impact. So we developed this call to action that is kind of directed at funders, development agencies, implementers, researchers, and innovators, with the objective to ensure that we have a world in which innovation and research lead to sustainable and equitable impact for the public good. And I just want to acknowledge those faces that are there as having contributed. This is the website. I can also provide the link for you to access this call. But we outline 8 actions that are pertinent for adoption by research organizations, by funders, and by policymakers, for us to be able to transform our research and innovation funding and implementation, so that we can have this kind of impact at scale that we want. The first one is the need to keep focus on scaling impact right from the start. The objective is not just to have an innovation in itself. We want to have impact at scale. And then for us to be able to get there, we also need to broaden our understanding of participatory approaches that also includes inclusion of different types of knowledge, indigenous knowledge system, having co-creation, in terms of the approach that we use in research. And then we also emphasize making equity of impact an equal measure to magnitude of impact, because sometimes it's really a numbers game. Like, if you have to report, people want to know how many farmers you've reached, never mind what has been the impact. And then, of course, the environment is also an important issue to consider when you design your research and innovation interventions. And then the need to move from beyond the project logic to fund impact. This also has implications in terms of the kind of projects and the duration of projects that we implement. And then the focus should be on supporting a learning culture, because sometimes people run with things that seem to work and they don't leave room to try other things. So we want to have, a learning culture being supported in terms of our research and innovation organizations. And then to also support local solutions, acknowledge the importance of local beliefs and indigenous knowledge systems. And then to also invest in the science of scaling, getting an understanding of what are the drivers, what is it, what is the science behind the translation of research into positive impact. So just to quickly unpack some of them, like I said, if you focus on scaling impact, then it no longer becomes a numbers game. And for public goods, scaling up is only valuable if it leads to a corresponding change in positive impact. So not all research and innovation outputs should be scaled. And then also looking at the possibility that maybe larger is not always good. What appears as though it's larger is not necessarily sustainable socially and for planetary health. And generally, it's time to rethink the purpose of scaling. Why do we keep talking about scaling? Is it about bigger? Is it about impact and optimal scale? And then the second point that we make as well is broadening understanding of participatory approaches, and that involves actually engaging local agency, because if we leave local agency, we risk leaving behind those that are most in need of this impact, and also those that are best placed to contribute to positive change. So the importance of research collaborations, and then to also acknowledge the fact that there is always some kind of potential conflict of interest. There are some that will support the intervention, others will not. So one needs to identify who are the winners and the likely losers, and you negotiate with those that are likely to lose from the intervention. And then the pursuit of optimal scale considers the perspective of both those that support and those that do not support. So multi-stakeholder engagement is really key. But all of these actions actually take time, so that means it should be an integral part of the budget. And I liked what the gentleman said when he was explaining that, you know, how do we get the farmers to understand this simple language? That now requires you to go there and engage with the farmers and maybe repackage the information. So we need to have budgets for that. And then you also make equity of impact an equal measure, or even more, for magnitude of impact. Because in our fight, you know, against poverty and environmental degradation, we're also fighting for equality and social justice, because when we don't have those, then we have a problem of instability. So we need to also, you know, integrate those considerations in terms of our decisions, and we must place scrutiny and emphasis on who exactly we are helping and who is being left behind, and also consistently assessing the impacts of our actions and interventions on the equity of impact within any particular society. And of course, then you want to identify innovations that actually reduce the inequality gap rather than those that increase the inequality gap. The environment, it's important, but I don't really think I need to talk about it because I'm speaking to the converted. Everybody knows the importance of this. And then the need to move from a project logic to fund impact. Most project funding cycles last about 2 to 3 years, and by then you really are just sometimes getting started in terms of, you know, kind of finding the light bulb in the innovation cycle. So if you really want to have impact, we're going to need to have some kind of re-engineering of the whole project cycle to, you know, longer kind of projects, or maybe even split into phases. But also in terms of how projects are designed, you then pick up from previous work that has been done by others. I think as researchers, we have this weakness that you always think you're the first one. You want to kind of start again, but we don't spend enough time understanding what has been done so that we can build on that. And then this kind of thinking as well requires a systems approach to problems solving, because then you're able to actually identify and address the root causes of the challenge. And then looking at this kind of thinking, it is very unlikely that a single project or even a single organization would be able to achieve scaling impact. So that is why we need to collaborate and partner, as well as co-funding mechanisms. So we need to actually reimagine our approaches to research. And sometimes scaling just what works is not really important. Like I said, we need to have room for making mistakes, room for sharing best practices, and to allow us to learn from those mistakes. And then also for sustainability, as well as scaling impact, you need to insist on local solutions. We come from a past where there were a lot of imported technologies that failed to gain the level of necessary traction in adoption amongst our farmers. And that is because we did not consult them. We go there assuming that there is no local knowledge that exists. So we need to acknowledge locally generated evidence that is often overlooked. And then lastly, we need to invest in the understanding of what exactly happens, what are the kind of models that, you know, we can work with in terms of gaining scaling impact. So we need to be systematic and scientific about the way that research and innovation is scaled so that we can be able to increase the likelihood of it resulting in meaningful change. And then we need some level of investment in collective learning about the scaling impact of research and innovation. I'm aware that there are some existing local communities of practice, and that is good. And then we need to also support and build communities of practice for scaling science, specifically testing different models, commissioning research within and across project portfolios, because there will be differences in terms of what is the best way to reach a scaling impact for different types of innovations and in different contexts. So I'm moving to my concluding remarks now, and I just tried to tie together what has been the discussion since the morning. I think there is no argument that Africa has capacity to innovate, and it is innovating. There is a broad range of digital, biotechnological or omics and social innovations. And then unfortunately though, the old challenges of food insecurity, poverty, low yields and inequality still persist. Also now coupled with new challenges such as the digital divide, vaccine inequity or vaccine inequality, as we found a few years ago. And then the policy frameworks also exist. Having listened to Dr. Maneshri this morning, there is, I think, some policy frameworks in place to guide the required action, and there are also numerous continental initiatives to develop research and innovation solutions that are aimed at addressing the different challenges. And also a reminder that the pie is not getting bigger, so we need to start doing things differently because we also have a growing population problem. So yeah, how do we now move from there? We need to normalize integrating measures of impact in decisions around research funding allocation. So this would be typically addressed at those that are responsible for funding research and innovation. For the researchers, one needs to be deliberate about integrating scaling impact in research and innovation. And sometimes we actually don't have the skills, so we need to work in inter and transdisciplinary teams for us to be able to tap into that resource. And then, I also want to ask, for us to ponder whether Africa is actually investing enough in terms of building intellectual capacity to explore and develop these new fields of science. There are some universities that are actually already offering scaling science as a degree. And yeah, maybe for Africa, we should not wait to play catch up again. There is, I think technology is evolving at a rapid pace, and we have the responsibility to ensure that, the outputs or the benefits from that technology actually reach the desired target groups and they realize the envisaged impact. I had thought earlier of a proverb that what's her name? Prof. Esther made her last slide when she talked about that proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, then go together. So we also need to think, maybe as a continent, we are focusing too much on going fast, but not going far. So we need to take a step back and really ask, what kind of impact are we aiming for and are we getting it? I want to acknowledge, like I said, this work was done in collaboration with other researchers from the Global South, and it was supported and facilitated by Canada's IDRC. And there is a couple of web-based resources that you can look into if you want to learn more about scaling science. There's a whole website about it. And then I also invite you, whether you're a funder or a research administrator or a researcher, to just read this call to action and contribute to that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Petronella, for that thoughtful and positive presentation. Any questions from the floor? Yes, sir. Is there a microphone for you somewhere?
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for such a comprehensive presentation. I'm having a very simple question here. Most of the aspects that you have touched are talking about research. So I'm having this question that as a junior researcher, or if I'm reading this thing that you are talking about, is forming kind of a triangle, if I can say it like so. There is a researcher from the institution. There are researchers in the higher innovators like ARC and other research companies, and there is the small scale farming. So now I'm asking, as how are you higher institutions make sure that the junior researchers are doing or are participating in research that will go directly to impact the industry, so as to avoid the thesis or the project that are done at the institution level and that they are staying in the shelf, not impacting directly the higher industry and also the community. Thank you very much.
Any other question at this stage, or should we let Petronella answer this one? There's another one here from Farai.
Sorry, Petronella, I missed a lot of your presentation, so it might be a question that's asking what you have already addressed. But in your conclusion, you talked about capacity and the need to actually develop that intellect capacity. How do you foresee it? I think there are issues around, universities now are really looking into developing new curricula to suit the demands, the upcoming skills that are required. So if you're looking at scaling up for impact and, building capacity, how do you foresee that actually, if I can summarize my question?
I think you can go ahead, Petronella.
Okay, thank you for the questions. I'll go with the first one. How do we ensure that research that is done is not going to stay in the shelf, and also the development of capacity for early career individuals? I think for me, there's already a lot that is happening, but there's always room for improvement. And I think there's 3 key ways to reach that. The first one is capacity development. We need to integrate this in our university curriculum. And somehow, the tragedy of South Africa is that, when a student exits the university, what they have learned that they will use in the workplace is actually very little. So we need this student to be exposed right from the start. And what actually distinguishes universities in South Africa is from each other is the extent of collaboration with the private sector, for example. or with the communities where these problems are actually experienced. Universities that have those stronger collaborations, they eventually churn out students that are stronger, that are more, you know, market ready in terms of job placement. And then, yeah, for the majority, then the lecturer is also just reading the textbooks and coming to regurgitate that, and that doesn't really help. So we need to build that capacity, and it's not textbook capacity. We need collaboration, cross-university, junior researcher, experienced researcher, industry, ARC, private sector, university, those kinds of collaborative partnerships. But we also need participatory approaches. We need to go and engage those communities, because I don't sit in my office and imagine what is the nature of the problem that farmers, livestock farmers are facing. I will not find it in the textbook. So before I design my research, I need to go. And the funders themselves, they actually maybe need to place more emphasis on, when you bring us this research to fund, we want to see evidence that you have a client for it. And that is not sufficiently happening. And then in terms of how you develop capacity, yeah, like I said, for somebody like myself that would probably not go sit down and be subject to exams again, it's, you know, short courses. Some of it you learn through interaction with colleagues, but you must also be open-minded, because if we're not open-minded in terms of our interactions, we don't grow. So I think we need to have, you know, to kind of encourage each other, but also organizations to reward this kind of out-of-the-box, you know, ways of doing things. It cannot continue to be business as usual. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Petronella. We leave it at that for now, but please remain there. Our second speaker, and please forgive me if I mispronounce your name, is Dr. Juho Kentaja. I probably messed that up terribly. The doctor is a senior specialist at MTech in Finland, talking about world leaders. They have a very interesting world leader in Finland, those of you who have watched the news. Dr. Juho, are you with us?
Yes, I am. I'm trying to make the slideshow visible.
Thank you. We can hear you. I can confirm that. We can see you as well. You have more hair.
Very good, and you can hear me and,
yes,
and see me. That's a good start. And now I'll try to share my screen and put the slideshow on.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. One more.
So please go ahead, introduce yourself, and then you can start.
Good. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juho Kyntäjä. Actually, I'm not a doctor. Sorry to say this, but but just a master. and I'm from Finland. I work here in a company called MTech Digital Solutions, and I was asked to tell you shortly about the integrated data collection that we have in herd management in Finland, and what this experience has taught us. So my name is Juho Kyntäjä. I've been working in this company since 2010. The company is a farmer-owned, or actually owned by two organizations that are owned by farmers, and it is the main, so to say, IT service provider for the Finnish agriculture, you could say, and we also provide services outside Finland, especially in the Nordic countries, but not only. So I'm working in the global unit as a senior specialist, and I also have some functions in the International Committee for Animal Recording. And due to those duties, I have also visited South Africa. So it's not entirely unknown to me how things look like over there. And of course, I do realize that what I'm going to present is from a very different background and environment. So I'll just say a few words about the Finnish milk production first. Yes, we are on the in the other end of the world, so to say. The milk production, well, the population of Finland is much smaller than South Africa. We are only about 6 million people. We produce 2.2 billion liters of milk per year. We have a little short of 4,000 recorded herds. Almost all of our herds are in the milk recording system. And here you can see the average herd size, which is not very big. Nice production figures. And what is very important is that in fact nowadays about 49% of our cows are in automatic milking, are being milked by robots, which also gives a lot of stress on data transfer because the robots are collecting data all the time. In Finland, what is remarkable about the data collection system, I would say, is that we have it integrated in many ways, and if we look at what sort of data we have managed to integrate, then in Finland, like in all European Union countries, we have something called the cattle movement register. That means that every animal has to be marked and registered, and this is something that farmers have to do by laws. And in this system they have the dates of birth and death, and they have the movements of animals from farm to farm and to slaughteries and so on. This is time limited. This is sanctioned. It is a very it's a very efficient but limited system. And obviously, when we are doing anything else with the animals, this is a basis of data on them that we want to have, so that the farmers would not need to report the same the same information again and again, and that's why we have built this this cattle movement register. It is a state system, so that is not run by us, but we have built connections to it so that we can have this data, or the relevant parts of it, let's say, for herd management, milk recording and breeding purposes, because we need the same data for all of these purposes. And in these services we need much more data than just this, but so that we have at least this basic data as it comes from the mandatory register. Then we have this milk recording and dairy advisory services, where we have the data that was mentioned before, but we add to this to those mandatory data, we add the artificial insemination and mating data. We add data on milk yield and composition. We add data on feeds and feeding for advisory purposes. We have stock records. We want to record what sort of technologies are being used on the farms, and we calculate production cost, and we want to have that also integrated into the same data, pieces of data. So we have all this in the milk recording and dairy advisory system, and the data side of it is run by my employer. Within this system, of course, all the data belongs to the farmer, so the farmer has to authorize anyone whom they want to be able to see the data in the system, and then the data is shared according to actual need. If we don't, for instance, share if let's say a farmer records a birth, then that birth data also goes from the milk recording to the mandatory reporting system for the state purposes. But if the farmer calculates a production cost, we would never share that with anyone whom the farmer has not authorized to see it. So that doesn't go to the state records. if you understand what I mean here. This is the organization that ProAgria is the organization that handles the milk recording and dairy advisory services on the field. Then we have the breeding evaluation and selection part. Here we have, of course, we need all the data that was mentioned before. Then we also need the pedigrees, cow events, production data, health and fertility data, which is also important in the Nordic breeding evaluation system. And then what it gives out is the breeding values. It gives possibilities for matching the cows and bulls, and then finding the best animals for the next generation. This is all integrated into the data exchange is integrated to the same system. Then, as I mentioned, we have a lot of robotic milking farms. So a very important part of data exchange is farm management software from different companies that are running the milking systems, and even if it's not automatic milking, then anyway, many of our farms have systems that record the milk weights at every milking, for instance. The farm management software, when they are starting a system, they are very happy to get a ready animal list from the advisory system. They are also very happy to get the preceding events of the cows, so that they will have the herd sort of ready to milk immediately. And then what we want to have back is the milking visits first and foremost. Well, of course, if you have a birth in the herd, then if you have automatic milking, you can't even milk the cow if you haven't reported the birth in the system. So there has to be very smooth data exchange between the farm management software, the mandatory cattle register, and the advisory system. Sometimes you can hear arguments that since there is this farm management software, that why do you need milk recording at all anymore? We would say that farm management software works on the minute-by-minute level, while milk recording services have a much longer span, and they are used for a different purpose. So at least we see that farmers mostly seem to think that they actually need both of these systems. Then there are nowadays on the market all sorts of different sensors for heat, rumination, movement, weight, animal shape, animal health status, and we want to be able to connect to these sensors to make better use of the data, because I mean, if we have a sensor and we have a milking machine, and then we have a milk recording database, and they are not connected, then of course we have the information there, but in order to make use of it, it is much better if we can connect it all, so that we can first of all see it in one place, and secondly, there often are interactions within the data that will only make it that will make it much more useful for the farmer in their daily lives. And this is also what we are nowadays working with. We have an animal health data system in Finland where all the animal treatments and medications are recorded together with their withdrawal times. We also have hoof treatments in this system, and this system combines the data on all sorts of treatments, and we also want to make use of this data in herd management and in animal breeding. And then the veterinarians and abattoirs, they have their own purposes for using this same sort of data, and that's why it is very important to combine with other data sources, which we are doing in practice. Yes. Then we also have connections with milk buyers. We get from the milk buyers, we get lab results. In Finland, the dairy labs are run by the milk buyers, which is a very, of course, unusual situation worldwide. But we also get bulk milk data so that we can compare the milk recording results with whatever milk has been sold to milk buyers on a daily basis. And the milk buyers in Finland, they want to have back the cow lists for them to be able to also do some more up-to-date reporting, which we also do on the basis of what we get from the milk buyers. And then we have built connections to abattoirs, so that the farmers have an easy way to report animals for slaughter or for brokering. In Finland, we have a system where dairy farms usually sell bull calves at the age of 2 weeks to the abattoir, but not for slaughter. But the abattoir will sell them on to another farm where they grow them to the age of about 18 months or so, or 20. So in this system in the system that we have a possibility that the farmers just simply registers that they want to sell these animals, and we send it to the abattoir, and when the abattoir actually comes to get them, then there will automatically be created an event for the national cattle movement database. But this, of course, is completely based on the farmer's wishes. If the farmer doesn't want to do this, then they can use other ways to report the animals, and they can, of course, they have a choice of abattoirs to select. So it's up to them. But we have at least these three we work with, the biggest ones in Finland. What have we learned when building these these data connections? We have learned that mutual trust and will to cooperate are very, very important. Without them, you can't really have integration. There has to be, I mean, if there is an integrator like us who is farmer-owned, then it will mean that, for instance, abattoirs who are each other's competitors, they will be more likely to work with a neutral body like us than they would be with each other. But we feel that information sharing is crucial. In today's world, if you want to keep all the information for yourself, you prevent it from becoming as useful as it would be in an ideal situation. We have also noticed that when we want to integrate, there often are scale issues. Finland is a small country, small milk producer, and when we talk to companies like Delaval and Lely, which are worldwide global organizations, they may or may not be willing to accommodate to what we want to have. And that's why we have noticed that when we join forces with other organizations that do the same thing in other countries, that will give us a much stronger position to talk to global companies and have cooperation with them. What this data integration has, why do we do it? I mean, one of the very important reasons is that we want to have the farmer, or our farmers actually, they only want to save data once. That if they have a piece of information, they've saved it somewhere, they don't want to do it again for some other purposes. So, they don't want to pay for some other people to come and collect the data again if it's already saved somewhere. So when the data is saved once, it can be used many times for many purposes, which we consider very important. Also, when we save the data only once, we will avoid errors. The data will be the same everywhere where it's needed. If you have separate data collection avenues for the same data, then you'll probably end up in a situation where the data looks like A in one avenue and like B in another. And then the very important thing, that when we have the data, we can combine data from different sources through this integration. It will provide the farmers with much better tools for decision making. So this was what I had prepared, so thank you for your attention. And is there going to be time for discussion now or later?
Yes.
I don't know, but
yes.
Yep.
Thank you, Master Juho. We will clap for you. I don't know if you will hear, but any questions from the floor at this stage? If not, I have an issue that I would like to raise. What you emphasized very clearly is the importance of collecting data, collecting lots of data to base decisions on data, which is excellent, of course. The issue is, in South Africa, the commercial sector has similar systems, not insofar as reporting to the authorities when a calf dies. I doubt if it's at that level. I know it's not at that level, but in terms of performance data, that type of thing is collected regularly, continuously, because it has value. It requires, of course, a significant investment in hardware and in software, which unfortunately the smallholder sector in South Africa will not be able to fund. And that's a dilemma we have. This morning we had a presentation by Manishri about the size of the commercial sector and the small scale sector. And I don't know if you noticed, the commercial sector is 35,000. Of course, it's a few thousand more or less, but that's the number. The number for smallholders she gave was 300 to 750,000. And that figure is, the difference is 100+% between the lower margin and the higher amount. So yes, we miss information for our smaller farmers. Any suggestion from your side in terms of how we can start the process of collecting better data for the farmers in South Africa, especially the smaller ones?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and actually I would like to say that where we are coming from in Finland is a situation where in the 1970s our average herd size was 5 cows, and when we already started collecting the data. But of course back then the data was being collected from the farms on paper, and then there was a central computer, and that was a very slow process. But nowadays, due to technological advance, I would dare to say that a lot of even these smaller farmers in South Africa probably have, for instance, cell phones and connections, and so that for instance there could be a possibility to use, let's say, some sort of small apps for data collection, even in those cases. Of course, they will not have robotic milking or big parlors where the data is collected automatically, but we do know that you can measure the milk. For instance, if you want to keep records of milk production, you can measure the milks with a weigh or a volume meter, and create records that way. So I think there's always ways to start, but it has to be relevant to the setting where we are entering with it.
Thank you very much. I think your answer is very relevant. The fact is that you can start small and build up over time, and we have the technology these days to be able to do that. Thank you for that. Any other questions for you? Yes, please. Microphone.
Afternoon. Thank you for the interesting talk. I just want to firstly excuse my lack of knowledge in terms of livestock and cows specifically. I just wanted to find out, so I know you moved or you have this robotic milking system going on. I just wanted to know, with the quality of the milk that you produce, firstly, quality, do you find that between robotic and also when you have like actual people down there milking the cows, isn't the robotic more stressful on the cow and therefore maybe affecting quality? Have you ever looked at whether robotic system is more stressful when milking the cow, and have you tested the difference between the quality when you have the robotic system and your prior system that you had with actual individuals that were milking the cow? Thank you.
Thank you. You?
Yes. I'm not entirely sure if I heard it all correctly, because there seems to be some problem. But if I understood that the question was about the differences between robotic and conventional milking. And
yes, and specifically about if there were quality differences and if there is a stress factor involved. Is robotic milking more stressful than conventional, and would that cause quality differences?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Actually, well, when we look at the results and when we look at the system. Robotic milking means that the robot is actually milking the cows all the time, and the cows can choose when they go to be milked. They usually go to the milking robot like 2.7 times per day, which is more often than they would usually be milked in a parlor or a more traditional setting. And because they have this choice, I would say that it's not more stressful. I would say that it even could be less stressful. It depends a lot on how things are done on the farm. I mean, in a parlor system, you may have a situation where the cows have to be squashed in between other cows for like an hour before they actually get into the milking parlor. And I would think that's more stressful than just simply walking into the robot and getting milked. From the point of view of the results, the cows in a robotic system tend to give a little more milk than the ones in a more traditional setting. And there is, well, no real difference in fat and protein. The cell counts are also practically the same. If there are issues on the farm, then they might get high cell counts due to mastitis, but this is not something that robotic milking really has an effect on.
Thank you very much. You answered the question quite well. Any more questions, Petronella?
Yeah, I just want to kind of give a detailed.
Please closer to the microphone. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now right.
All right, so I just wanted to give a different angle to the discussion. I was just sitting here thinking, okay, this really sounds like something that is great, and trying to imagine how would we implement it in our smallholder farming systems. And then I remembered an encounter that I had mid-July when I went to rural Limpopo to talk to livestock farmers. I've been doing research on, you know, the socio-economic aspects of livestock farming. I did my PhD on that. So it's an area that I really believe that I knew everything about livestock farming until I went to this place with somebody that is a philosopher, a lady, a Dutch lady that specializes in African philosophy. I went to exactly the same farmers that I've been going to for years to talk about, you know, socio-economic aspects of livestock research. And I was shocked at how little I knew about livestock systems in this area. I'll just give you an example. When we started asking them, okay, what is your relationship with livestock? There was one lady that we were taken to. She'd been keeping livestock for many years, and then her husband passed on. She continued keeping the livestock, but the kids all moved to the city. So she remained there with this head of cattle. But then they helped they employ somebody, a header, that really was very disrespectful, wouldn't listen to this woman. The cows were getting stolen. It was just chaotic, the whole situation. So the children eventually decided that she must sell the 30 or so plus cattle that she'd had, you know, just to save her health. And when we went to see her, it was a few weeks after this decision to have to sell the cattle. She said to us, at the end of the day, when the cattle are coming back and I hear the bells, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Like there's a child that is supposed to come here that has died but is not coming home. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I was really shaken because I've always thought, okay, excuse the language, Atian, but I've always thought, okay, it's white people that get so attached to
to animals.
To animals. But now I realize that, okay, the same way that you're attached to your cat or your dog, you know, our people are really attached to this animal. And she's not in any way, you know, not economically rational, because when you ask her, she'll tell you about the value of this cow in terms of the milk, you know, the value on the market. She knew the market prices and everything. So it's almost as though there is this coexistence of the different dimensions of livestock system, that if you're going to bring in any innovation and you dare miss one of those dimensions, then you're never going to understand what went wrong with your brilliant technology. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of answer myself, and I also asked Atian whether this is something that would work in our system. I think we would really need to have a lot of considerations because of these additional nuances that come with livestock systems. Thanks.
Thank you, Petronella. You want to add something?
Well, I do agree that of course, whatever you do, you have to do it in the local context, taking into account the things that affect the local farmer. Actually, we also have some people who are very attached to their cows, in the sense that when we've had a lot of farmers closing production in the last decades, and it's really very difficult for very many people, and not because they are losing money, but because they are losing the animals. Yeah.
Thank you very much. If there's one thing I've learned in a few years in research that I've been involved, which is a few decades, is that you need humility and a curious mind always as a researcher. You must always remain curious, not make assumptions about what other people and farmers know and what they do, and you know, provide for their rationality and say, but this is why they do things. Thank you, Petronella. Thank you. I think it was a very important discussion, this about the importance of data, and that we have a responsibility to get better data. I'm going to end the session now with a thanks to Africa Bio and the ARC that I work for facilitating this particular discussion. Thank you very much also to the speakers, you and Petronella, and thank you for those of you who were patient and interested in this session. You can give yourself a round of applause to end off.